we took that to heart for a couple of reasons. One is, if you look at, let's say, all the chapters, even in Volume 1, and all the individual strategies in each of them, I mean, there's no way you can deal with all those strategies on their own terms in isolation. I mean, you just can't possibly do it. So one reason to think about integration is just efficiency, time. Building as much as you can in any context covers many bases. That makes sense. Or we'll just never be able to get all this done. The second reason is integrating can make meaning more meaningful for children if we embed some things in their context. And certainly language is one of those things where if we embed some of that in context, physical context, there's some support for language. But so those are the two big reasons why integration is important. And let me see if I can go next one here. So I'm kind of saying, again, here on the slide what I just said. So even in Chapter 4, there are all these individual lists. It does not mean that you do each one individually. Many of these can be done simultaneously. So that more than one literacy, understanding, or skill can be supported in the same broad context or even the same literacy focused activity. And I think that's that oral storytelling example I just gave, where she let go of the possibility to do the literacy skills. It's a great example. That was teacher directed. That was whole group. And so even in that context, she wasn't bringing in what she could have to support more than just the oral language. And then you can look at strategies across substrands, strands, and even across domains. And I have a couple examples. So this is a within domain example. And it is a strategy, write down interesting words as they come up, which is on page, I forget what page it is. But if we would pull that one all apart in terms of how it plays out in that little paragraph description, it's not just writing down words as they come up during the day on a white marker board, but then I had a follow-up to that, where in a group time, the teacher would say, you know, there were some very interesting words that children use today, and I wrote some of them down, and I think the child's name I had was Nathaniel. You know, he was telling me about what he had seen at a construction site and so forth, and this is the word, and you have the child tell about it, and then you expand. The word I used was gigantic, and when he told about it, I had him saying a great big crane instead of gigantic. Now, that's not unusual for a child to use gigantic in one context, and then in another one, just say a great big crane. And then they have the teacher expanding and using, yes, it was a great big crane, a gigantic crane. So what I did here is we've got the writing of the child's word. We have this, and it models print awareness. I mean, environmental print is one thing, but you know, it's kind of sitting there. And children know it means something, but what it means specifically, they maybe don't know. But to take language as it's coming at you and write it down, and then to read that back as an example of print really gets to sort of the specificity and also some of the print awareness learnings. So we've got reading, we've got writing, and we've got language. And we've got expressive language, both from the child and from the teacher. So that is, I think, a good example of across reading and writing, or reading and language, or literacy and language strands. And then I took a math example, and this is from the measurement substrand, and it is a strategy to encourage children to record and document what they have measured. And if you don't have that, chapter with you, but one of the first things it says is children will explain to you, you know, what they've measured. So we have the child talking, and I can imagine the adult is conversing and clarifying, you know, what the child is telling him or her. And then we have the child documenting, or we have the teacher documenting, so we've got some writing there. So we've got math, and we've got language, and we have reading and writing. So, and I was going through the social emotional chapter and the math chapter, there are many items that use books. So I could have picked that substrand of the reading in terms of using books. We get back to that later because it's a little tricky when we integrate sometimes. For example, there's a lot of using literature across the grades, not just preschool, but kindergarten, primary grades, to teach math. And you have to be careful, I think, that you don't hijack storybooks to teach math and destroy reading comprehension. So we'll get to that kind of example later in terms of where we have to be careful when we integrate and not just tuck everything in without really thinking about what we're doing. Okay, I think we've got a few more minutes. Okay. Let's get to environmental print.